The courtroom in Moscow's House of Unions is packed with spectators. It is August 1936, and 36 cameras capture every angle as Grigory Zinoviev, once Lenin's closest confidant, stands before his accusers. His face is gaunt, hollow. The man who helped lead the Bolshevik revolution now grips the defendant's rail with trembling hands. Around him, 15 other men, former heroes of the Soviet state, wait their turn to confess. They will admit to crimes they did not commit. They will describe conspiracies that never existed. They will beg for death, and the entire nation will watch. This is not a trial. This is theater. Stalin has written the script, cast the actors, and guaranteed the ending. In 3 days, all 16 defendants will be found guilty. Within hours of the verdict, they will be executed. Their names will be erased from history books. Their faces airbrushed from photographs. Their families destroyed. This is the first of 3 great show trials that will define Stalin's Great Purge, a campaign of terror that will consume nearly 750,000 lives in just 2 years. This is Blueprint. Zinoviev speaks. His voice cracks as he tells the court he organized terrorist groups to assassinate Stalin. He claims he worked with Leon Trotsky, Stalin's exiled rival, to sabotage Soviet industry and restore capitalism. He describes meetings that never occurred, plots that existed only in the imagination of the NKVD interrogators who spent months breaking him. The prosecutor, Andrei Vyshinsky, circles him like a predator. Vyshinsky's questions are not questions at all. They are accusations wrapped in rhetorical fury, delivered at volumes that echo off the marble walls. The gallery is packed. Foreign journalists fill the front rows, invited by Stalin to witness Soviet justice in action. They scribble notes furiously. Most believe what they see. The confessions are too detailed, too self-damning to be false. How could these men lie about their own guilt? Behind the journalists sit workers carefully selected by the NKVD, coached on when to gasp, when to shout denunciations, when to applaud the prosecutor's verbal assaults. This is performance, and everyone has their role. Karl Radek will later describe the atmosphere during his own trial in 1937. The heat of the lights, the exhaustion, the strange, dreamlike quality of confessing to fantasies. But he will say these things only in the brief window before his execution. The defendants have been promised their lives will be spared if they cooperate. They have been told their families will be protected. These are lies, but the men are too broken to recognize them anymore. Zinoviev finishes his confession. He does not look at the gallery. He stares at his hands. Lev Kamenev stands next. Kamenev, who founded Pravda with Lenin, who served as the first head of the Moscow Soviet. His confession follows the same pattern: terrorism, sabotage, collaboration with fascists. The script is precise because the NKVD has rehearsed it endlessly. Interrogators have spent months in the basement cells of Lubyanka prison, extracting confessions through sleep deprivation, beatings, threats against wives and children, and psychological torture refined to an art form. The trial runs for 6 days. Each defendant speaks, each admits guilt, each implicates others. The web of conspiracy grows so vast, so intricate, that it becomes absurd. These men, the prosecution claims, somehow managed to plot the overthrow of the world's most powerful security state while holding government positions under constant surveillance. They supposedly recruited hundreds of co-conspirators, while leaving no physical evidence, no letters, no documents, no witnesses beyond each other's extracted confessions. Vyshinsky delivers his closing argument on August 21st. He does not present evidence. He does not need to. The confessions are evidence enough in Stalin's Soviet Union. Instead, he performs. He thunders about traitors and enemies of the people. He compares the defendants to rabid dogs who must be shot. He demands death. The audience erupts in approval. Outside the October Hall across Moscow, across the entire Soviet Union, citizens gather around radios to hear these denunciations. Newspapers print every word of the proceedings. Stalin has made this trial impossible to ignore. The verdict arrives swiftly. Guilty on all counts, death by shooting. No appeals. The sentence is carried out within hours in the basement of Lubyanka. Zinoviev, according to NKVD records, declassified decades later, begs for his life at the end. The promises of clemency vanish like a smoke. He and Kamenev are shot in the same room, minutes apart. Their bodies are cremated. Their ashes are dumped in a mass grave. Within weeks, their wives are arrested. Zinoviev's son is executed. Kamenev's sons are sent to the Gulag, but this is only the beginning. To understand how the Soviet Union arrives at this moment, how Stalin transforms a courtroom into a slaughterhouse, how he convinces millions that obvious fiction is truth, we must step backward. We must return to 1924, to Lenin's death, to the power struggle that follows. Vladimir Lenin dies on January 21st, 1924, after a series of strokes. He leaves no clear successor. His final testament, written in December 1922, warns the Communist Party about Stalin. Lenin describes Stalin as too crude, too capricious, too concentrated with unlimited power as general secretary. He recommends Stalin's removal. The testament is suppressed. Stalin's rivals, Zinoviev, Kamenev, and Trotsky, make the fatal mistake of underestimating him. They view him as an administrator, a bureaucrat without charisma or revolutionary credentials. They are wrong. Stalin understands power in ways the other Bolshevik intellectuals do not. He controls party appointments through his position as general secretary. He places loyalists throughout the bureaucracy. He masters the art of playing rivals against each other. When Zinoviev and Kamenev fear Trotsky's influence, Stalin allies with them to marginalize Trotsky. Then, when Zinoviev and Kamenev grow too powerful, Stalin pivots. He allies with Nikolai Bukharin and other moderates to isolate them. By 1927, Trotsky is expelled from the party. By 1929, he is expelled from the Soviet Union. Zinoviev and Kamenev are stripped of their positions but allowed to remain, broken and humiliated. 4 years, this seems sufficient. Stalin consolidates control. He launches forced collectivization of agriculture in 1929, causing a famine that kills millions. He drives rapid industrialization through 5-year plans that transform the Soviet Union from an agrarian society into an industrial power at enormous human cost. Opposition exists, but remains scattered, disorganized. Then something shifts. The shift is inside Stalin's mind, and we can only glimpse it through his actions. In December 1934, Sergei Kirov is assassinated in Leningrad. Kirov is a popular party leader, a potential rival to Stalin. The assassination is likely orchestrated by Stalin himself, though this cannot be proven definitively until later. What can be proven is Stalin's response. He uses Kirov's death as a trigger. Within hours, he pushes through an emergency decree that allows for rapid prosecution of terrorists. Trials without defense attorneys, no appeals, immediate executions. This decree becomes the legal framework for everything that follows. The first wave of arrests begins immediately. Zinoviev and Kamenev are rounded up and accused of moral complicity in Kirov's murder. They receive prison sentences but are released after show trials in 1935. These early trials are rehearsals. Stalin is testing methods, refining techniques. He discovers that public confession is more powerful than secret execution. Confession transforms opposition into theater, allows him to rewrite history in real time, turns his victims into active participants in their own destruction. By early 1936, Stalin is ready for the main production. He orders the NKVD, led by Genrikh Yagoda, to prepare a case against Zinoviev, Kamenev, and their associates. The charge will be terrorism, specifically organizing a Trotskyist Zinovievist terrorist center that planned to assassinate Stalin and other Soviet leaders. The evidence will be confessions. Nothing else is needed. The interrogations begin in spring 1936. Zinoviev and Kamenev are arrested again, this time under Kirov's law. They are held in Lubyanka, the NKVD headquarters in Moscow. The building becomes synonymous with terror. Its basement cells, its interrogation rooms, its execution chamber. Prisoners call it the place where night lasts forever. The lights never dim. Sleep is forbidden. Interrogators work in shifts, asking the same questions for hours, days, weeks. Physical torture is used, but not excessively. Stalin wants his defendants presentable for trial. Psychological pressure is the preferred method. Zinoviev resists initially. He has spent his entire adult life as a revolutionary. He helped lead the October Revolution, served as chairman of the Communist International, governed Leningrad for years. He cannot understand why Stalin wants this theatrical confession. He offers to admit mistakes, to grovel privately, to disappear into obscurity. This is not enough. Stalin wants public confession, detailed conspiracy, complete self-destruction. The interrogators tell Zinoviev his son will be tortured unless he cooperates. They tell him his confession will save other innocents from arrest. They promise his life will be spared. Zinoviev breaks. Kamenev proves more difficult. He is intellectual, ironic, capable of maintaining psychological distance even under pressure. The interrogators shift tactics. They bring in his sons, arrested as leverage. They stage mock executions. They tell him everyone else has already confessed, that his resistance is pointless. Eventually, he too submits. The confessions are written and rewritten by NKVD scriptwriters. Every word is calibrated for maximum impact. The defendants are forced to memorize their parts, like actors learning lines. Rehearsals are conducted in Lubyanka. Those who stumble or deviate are beaten and made to start again. The trial opens on August 19th, 1936. Stalin watches from a hidden room behind a curtain. He does not attend publicly. He maintains the fiction that this is an independent judicial proceeding, but he is there, supervising, ensuring the performance meets his standards. The defendants enter looking haggard but functional. They wear suits, not prison uniforms. Their appearance must suggest men who are guilty but rational, broken but coherent. The audience sees what Stalin wants them to see. The prosecution presents no physical evidence because none exists. No documents proving conspiracy, no weapons found, no witnesses beyond the defendants themselves. This should be scandalous, but the Soviet legal system operates under different rules. In Stalin's courts, confession is the highest form of evidence. The accused have admitted guilt. What more proof is needed? Western observers, particularly left-leaning journalists and intellectuals, struggle to process this reality. Many accept the confessions at face value. Others rationalize. Perhaps these old Bolsheviks really did turn to terrorism in desperation. The alternative, that the entire proceeding is fabricated, is too disturbing to accept. Zinoviev's testimony reveals the psychological dynamics. He confesses but cannot help inserting small acts of rebellion. He admits organizing terrorist groups but emphasizes he never personally killed anyone. He describes meetings with Trotsky but gets dates and locations wrong, forcing Vyshinsky to correct him. These inconsistencies should undermine the prosecution, but the court ignores them. The verdict is predetermined. The trial is merely the mechanism for public legitimation. International reaction splits along predictable lines. Soviet sympathizers defend the verdicts. The defendants confessed, they argue. The Soviet Union is under siege from capitalist powers and internal enemies. Harsh measures are necessary for survival. Conservative critics see the trials as proof of communist totalitarianism, but even many conservatives struggle to explain the confessions. If the charges are false, why would these men admit guilt? The psychology of coerced confession is not widely understood in 1936. The concept of show trial as theater is alien to Western legal traditions. The executions follow immediately. No time for reflection, for appeals, for international pressure to build. Zinoviev and Kamenev die on August 25, 1936. NKVD records, opened after the Soviet collapse, describe their final moments. Both men realized too late that cooperation has purchased nothing. The promises were lies. Their families will be destroyed anyway. Zinoviev reportedly says to his executioner, "Please, comrade, for God's sake call Stalin. Stalin promised to spare me." The executioner shoots him without responding. Kamenev goes silently. The first Moscow trial, officially the case of the Trotskyist Zinovievist terrorist center, establishes the pattern. Stalin waits only months before launching the second. In January 1937, 17 more defendants face trial. This time the charges expand. Not just terrorism but sabotage, industrial wrecking, collaboration with Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. The conspiracy grows more elaborate, more international, more fantastical. Karl Radek, a brilliant journalist and party intellectual, plays a starring role. His trial includes moments of dark comedy. He jokes with Vyshinsky, offers witty asides, maintains his ironic detachment even while confessing to treason. 13 of the 17 defendants are executed. Radek receives a 10-year sentence, a temporary reprieve. He will die in the Gulag in 1939, officially killed by fellow prisoners, likely murdered on Stalin's orders. The third Moscow trial arrives in March 1938. This time the target is even more shocking: Nikolai Bukharin, Lenin's favorite of the party, the intellectual soul of Bolshevism. Bukharin is arrested in February 1937, but held for a year while interrogators work on him. He proves exceptionally difficult to break. He writes letters to Stalin pleading innocence, analyzing his own psychology, trying to understand why Stalin wants his destruction. The letters are preserved in archives. They are extraordinary documents, mixing desperation with philosophical reflection. Bukharin eventually confesses, but uses his trial testimony to subtly undermine the charges. He admits general political guilt while denying specific criminal acts. He speaks in Aesopian language, embedding hidden messages in his confession. Most observers miss the subtext. He is convicted and shot. The 3 Moscow trials are only the public face of the Great Purge. Behind the spectacle of the October Hall, a vast machinery of terror operates across the Soviet Union. Between 1936 and 1938, approximately 1.5 million people are arrested on political charges. Roughly 750,000 are executed. Millions more are sent to the Gulag labor camps. The victims include party members, military officers, NKVD agents, intellectuals, workers, peasants, ethnic minorities. The purge consumes itself. Interrogators who extract confessions are later arrested and forced to confess in turn. Marshal Mikhail Tukhachevsky, the Red Army's most talented commander, is arrested in May 1937 and executed after a secret trial. His confession is signed in blood, literally. He is tortured so severely that he cannot hold a pen and must sign his statement after beating. With him dies much of the Red Army's high command. When Nazi Germany invades in 1941, the Soviet military leadership is hollowed out, still recovering from Stalin's purge. The initial German advance is catastrophically successful, in part because Stalin has executed or imprisoned his most capable generals. The NKVD establishes quotas for arrests and executions. Regional offices must meet targets for discovering enemies of the people. This creates perverse incentives. NKVD officers arrest randomly to fulfill quotas, extract confessions through torture, create elaborate conspiracies connecting innocent people. The confessions lead to more arrests, as each prisoner is forced to name accomplices. The process feeds on itself. Entire social networks are destroyed. Families are shattered. Children of executed enemies are sent to orphanages where they are raised to denounce their parents. Stalin uses the purge to reshape Soviet society completely. The old Bolsheviks, the generation that made the revolution, that remembers a time before Stalin's absolute power, are systematically eliminated. A new generation rises, owing everything to Stalin, knowing only Stalin's version of history. The revolution's idealism is replaced by fear and obedience. The party becomes an instrument of one man's will rather than a collective leadership. The show trials themselves represent innovation in authoritarian control. Stalin understands something profound about power. Public confession is more effective than secret execution. When Zinoviev confesses in the October Hall, he does not just die, he validates Stalin's worldview. He confirms the conspiracy. He proves Stalin's enemies are real. His confession becomes propaganda, impossible to refute because it comes from his own mouth. This technique will be copied by totalitarian regimes worldwide. The show trial becomes a defining feature of 20th century authoritarianism. Yet the trials also contain contradictions that undermine their effectiveness over time. The charges are too extreme. The conspiracies too vast. Defendants are accused of crimes that defy logic. How did Bukharin simultaneously work for British intelligence, German intelligence, Japanese intelligence, and Polish intelligence, while also organizing assassination attempts and industrial sabotage, all without leaving any evidence? The absurdity becomes apparent even to sympathetic observers. The American journalist Eugene Lyons, initially supportive of the Soviet Union, becomes disillusioned after attending the trials. He writes that the proceedings have a quality of nightmare, and that accepting the confessions requires a wholesale suspension of disbelief. Stalin does not care about long-term credibility. He needs immediate compliance, immediate terror. The show trials accomplish this perfectly. Every party member understands the message. Confession can be extracted from anyone. Loyalty is no protection. Past service means nothing. The only safety is in absolute submission and constant vigilance against potential accusation. Trust becomes impossible. Friendships dissolve. Families inform on each other. Soviet society atomizes, with each individual isolated and vulnerable. The purge ends abruptly in November 1938. Stalin replaces NKVD chief Nikolai Yezhov with Lavrenti Beria. Yezhov himself is arrested and executed in 1940, blamed for excesses during the purge. This is Stalin's pattern. Push terror to extremes, then blame subordinates for going too far. Present himself as restoring order. The population, exhausted by fear, accepts this narrative. Stalin is thanked for ending the terror he created. The legacy of the show trials extends far beyond the immediate victims. The trials corrupt truth itself. In Stalin's Soviet Union, reality becomes whatever the party says it is. History is rewritten continuously. Photographs are altered to remove purged figures. Encyclopedia entries are revised. Children are taught that Trotsky was always a fascist agent, that Bukharin was always a saboteur, that the show trials revealed genuine conspiracies. Multiple generations grow up unable to distinguish truth from propaganda. When Nikita Khrushchev delivers his secret speech in 1956 denouncing Stalin's crimes, he reveals that Stalin personally edited interrogation records and trial transcripts. Stalin would cross out lines in confessions and write in new accusations. He directed the entire performance from behind the scenes. The show trials were literally Stalin's creative work. He was playwright, director, and critic. Khrushchev's revelations shock the Soviet elite but are kept from the public. Full truth about the purges emerges only during Glasnost in the late 1980s. The 3 Moscow trials produced 21 death sentences, but their true body count is incalculable. Every defendant who confessed was forced to name co-conspirators. Each name led to arrests, which led to more forced confessions, which led to more arrests. The cascade of accusations spread across the Soviet Union like contagion. Entire party organizations were destroyed. Industries were purged of wreckers. Scientific institutes lost generations of researchers. The military was decapitated. Estimates suggest the show trials directly or indirectly led to hundreds of thousands of arrests and executions. Survivor testimony collected after Stalin's death reveals the psychological impact. Evgenia Ginsburg, arrested in 1937, describes the disorientation of being accused of crimes that have no connection to reality. She writes of prisoners who initially believe their arrests are mistakes, that the party will recognize the error and release them. This belief sustains them through early interrogations. Then comes the moment of understanding. There will be no release, no recognition of error. The party does not make mistakes. If you are arrested, you are guilty. The confession is merely a formality. Ginsburg survives 18 years in the Gulag. Most do not. The show trials also damage Soviet foreign policy. When Stalin signs the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Nazi Germany in August 1939, Western observers recall the trials where defendants were accused of collaborating with fascists. The irony is obvious. Stalin now allies with the regime his prosecutors claimed the defendants served. The trial's credibility collapses further. Even committed communists in Western countries begin to question. The Spanish Civil War veteran George Orwell, observing Soviet actions in Spain and the show trials in Moscow, writes Animal Farm and 1984, novels that dissect totalitarian propaganda and the manipulation of truth. The question that haunts the show trials is why the defendants confessed. We know now about the torture, the threats, the psychological pressure, but knowledge does not fully explain. Some defendants could have remained silent. Some could have used the trial to denounce Stalin publicly. The international press was present. One defiant testimony might have exposed the fraud, yet nearly all cooperated. This requires explanation. Part of the answer lies in party discipline. These old Bolsheviks spent their lives believing in the party's infallibility, admitting the party was wrong, that it could stage false trials, that Stalin had betrayed the revolution, meant acknowledging their entire worldview was false. Some defendants genuinely believed their confessions served the party, even if the specific charges were invented. They convinced themselves that sacrificing their reputations, their lives, was their final duty. Part of the answer is simpler: human breaking points. The interrogations lasted months. Sleep deprivation, isolation, physical abuse, threats against family members. Everyone breaks eventually. The NKVD understood this. They systematically destroyed psychological resistance until confession became the path of least resistance, almost a relief. The defendants confessed not because they believed the charges, but because they could no longer maintain denial. And part of the answer is darker still. Some defendants held out hope that confession would save them, that Stalin's promises of clemency were real. They were wrong, but the hope sustained them through the trial. By the time they realized the truth in the moments before execution, it was too late. The show trials represent a particular kind of totalitarian innovation, the weaponization of confession. Stalin understood that traditional authoritarian violence is limited. You can kill opponents, but martyrs become symbols of resistance. Confession neutralizes this. When Zinoviev confesses, he cannot become a martyr. He becomes evidence of his own guilt, of the conspiracy's reality, of Stalin's justice. This is why Stalin insisted on public trials rather than secret executions. The spectacle was the point, yet the trials also reveal totalitarianism's fundamental weakness, its dependence on lies. Systems built on fabrication are inherently unstable. The show trials worked in 1936 because Soviet society was isolated, information was controlled, and terror suppressed dissent. But lies accumulate. Contradictions multiply. Eventually, the gap between propaganda and reality becomes too large to ignore. The Soviet Union spent decades managing this gap, using violence and censorship to prevent collapse. When Gorbachev relaxed control in the 1980s, the accumulated weight of historical lies contributed to the system's rapid disintegration. The victims of the show trials were officially rehabilitated starting in the 1950s. Zinoviev, Kamenev, Bukharin, Radek, all were declared innocent. Their confessions recognized as coerced. Their party memberships were restored posthumously. This rehabilitation was incomplete and selective. Soviet authorities acknowledged that specific individuals were wrongly convicted, but maintained that the Great Purge as a whole was justified, merely distorted by excesses. Full accounting never occurred during the Soviet period. After 1991, Russian archives opened partially. Researchers gained access to interrogation records, execution orders, Stalin's personal notes on trials. The documentation is extensive and chilling. Stalin's handwriting appears throughout, directing who should be arrested, what they should confess, how trials should proceed. The show trials emerge not as aberrations, but as expressions of the Soviet system's core logic, the absolute primacy of power over truth, the treatment of human beings as props in ideological theater. Modern Russia's relationship with this history remains complicated. Under Putin, Stalin has been partially rehabilitated as a symbol of Soviet strength. Some Russians view the purges as unfortunate but necessary for building Soviet power. Others, particularly descendants of victims, continue fighting for full acknowledgement. Memorial, the human rights organization that documented Stalin's crimes, was ordered to close by Russian authorities in 2021. The battle over historical memory continues. What can we take from the show trials beyond horror? Perhaps this: the fragility of truth in political systems, the ease with which confession can be extracted, the danger of ideologies that place abstract goals above individual lives. The defendants in the October Hall were not saints. Many had participated in revolutionary violence, supported authoritarian measures, justified cruelty in the name of building socialism. Yet they did not deserve what happened to them. No one does. The show trials ask us to consider what we would do in their position. Throughout the 20th century and into the 21st, political prisoners worldwide face similar choices. The methods are refined, the settings change, but the fundamental dynamic persists. Power demanding not just obedience, but enthusiastic participation in its lies. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the show trials is how many people believed them. Millions of Soviet citizens accepted the confessions as genuine. Western intellectuals defended the verdicts. The Webbs, George Bernard Shaw, even elements of the American left vouched for Stalin's justice. This was not stupidity, but the power of ideological commitment. People believed because they needed to believe, because accepting the trials were fraudulent meant acknowledging that their political faith was misplaced. Belief became a form of self-protection against cognitive dissonance. The show trials end, but the purge continues into 1938. Only when Stalin feels secure, when the old Bolsheviks are dead, when the party is populated entirely by his creatures, when Soviet society is atomized and terrorized into submission, does he allow the machinery to slow. The cost is staggering. The Soviet Union enters World War II with its military leadership destroyed, its scientific community depleted, its population traumatized. Victory comes despite the purge, not because of it, at a cost of over 20 million Soviet lives. In the October Hall in August 1936, Zinoviev stands and confesses to crimes he did not commit. Around him, cameras capture every word. Across the Soviet Union, citizens gather to hear his voice crackling through radio speakers. They believe what they hear because the alternative is too terrible to contemplate. Zinoviev speaks his lines. Vyshinsky delivers his denunciations. The verdict arrives. The executions follow. The show must go on, and it does for 2 more years, consuming hundreds of thousands more victims before Stalin finally calls the curtain. What was the purpose of all this death? Security? Stalin was never more secure than after the purge, but he was never truly safe either. He died alone, frightened of assassination, trusting no one. Ideology? The show trials betrayed every principle of the revolution they claimed to protect. Power? Perhaps. Perhaps the purpose was simply power's exercise. Terror for its own sake, the ultimate expression of one man's will over millions. The show trials force us to confront uncomfortable truths about political systems, human psychology, and the malleability of reality itself. They demonstrate that confession can be extracted from anyone given sufficient pressure. They prove that elaborate lies, if supported by state power, can be maintained for decades. They show how quickly revolutionary idealism can curdle into totalitarian brutality. We might ask whether such trials could happen again. The answer, disturbingly, is that they never stopped. Different countries, different ideologies, different specific methods, but the fundamental pattern persists. Show trials where the verdict is predetermined, where confession is the goal, where the proceeding serves propaganda rather than justice. The vocabulary changes, the legal frameworks adapt, the core remains, the dead cannot be brought back, the lost years cannot be recovered. The historical record, so carefully falsified by Stalin, can never be completely restored. What remains are questions. How do societies prevent such catastrophes? How do individuals resist when resistance seems futile? How do we remember honestly without drowning in despair? The cameras in the October Hall captured everything except the truth. The transcripts preserve every word of confession, but none of the months of torture that produced them. The official narrative proclaimed justice while enacting murder, and for years, for decades, millions believed because the alternative required confronting that the revolution they supported, the state they built, the leader they followed had become monstrous. Zinoviev is dead, Kamenev is dead, Bukharin is dead. The 3 Moscow trials are historical fact. The confessions remain on record, artifacts of a time when power could reshape reality itself, when testimony could be extracted through weeks of sleepless terror, when the Soviet state decided that old revolutionaries must not merely die, but must destroy themselves publicly first. The trials are over. The questions remain. What would we have done? What will we do when power demands not just obedience, but enthusiastic participation in lies? The October Hall is silent now, but its lessons echo still.